I want to read you something. It's about Jesus. Jesus was a radical, nonviolent revolutionary who hung around with lepers, hookers, and crooks. Was an American and never spoke English. Was anti-wealth, anti-death penalty, anti-public prayer, Matthew 6.5, but was never anti-gay, never mentioned abortion or birth control, never called the poor lazy, never justified torture, never fought for tax cuts for the wealthiest Nazarenes, never asked a leper to co-pay for their health care, and was a long-haired, brown-skinned Middle Eastern Jew. Okay, now back in my day, I recall the hostility and prejudice that was out there for Jewish people within the confines of Christianity. And now they're all on board, and still trying to convert people, from Judaism into Christianity. They're over there trying to evangelize the Holy Land. Now, I just want you to know, yes, what I do sometimes is on the border of bashing evangelicals and Catholics, and sometimes there's collateral hurt in what I say. And for that, I am truly sorry. There are a lot of good people of faith that don't buy into these rabidly hostile views of the religious right, who are wrong, quite frankly. It's not about interpretation. All you have to do is listen to the Sermon on the Mount to see where Jesus Christ stood. And he stood way higher than the greedy. I have my problems with Islam. And, I'm not one of these liberals saying, oh, some of my best friends are Muslim. I have a few friends that happen to be. None of them are women. They're all Muslim men. They have their cultural thing. And one of my requirements when I hang out with them is that we don't get into the topic of women because it will make me angry. And you ask women in interviews, Muslim women, if they're happy. I think a lot of times, they know that video is going to be shown somewhere. I am beginning to look at Islam a lot differently. And again, it's the same thing. What has happened with modern Christianity, modern Islam, and in some aspects of modern Judaism, is an air of the extreme has taken over. The one thing, and people don't hear me too much, talking about, the Jews, is very simple. They don't seek converts, and they're not trying to evangelize and, push people into a set of handcuffs that are too tight for them. They're not trying to get them to, falsely proclaim faith, which is what a lot of people do. Some just go to church because of the business contacts. You hear, and I'm not getting into this bullshit of who said what first, okay? I remember growing up when the IRA was blowing up all kinds of places, and children were getting killed, etc. Okay, and more recently, the things still going on in Palestine, between Israel and Palestine. And, it gets into the argument of, yeah, there was a big crowd and somebody threw a stone, and now everybody's throwing them at each other. And by the way, remember what Jesus said about that. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Yes, the devil knows the Bible too. At least that's the perception that people have when you challenge them. Even sometimes when you direct them to the Bible. I personally, you talk about what's inappropriate. I don't think Noah is an appropriate children's story Because if the children read on, and they don't tell the whole story, but as we all know, it ends in drunken, incestuous butt sex, okay? And, I mean, a friend of mine, Rachel Betty, a long time ago, said that all pagans should read the Bible. I didn't as a Buddhist. The only part of the Bible that I really knew was the Sermon on the Mount. And, honestly, it complements Buddha's teachings, what Christ was saying in the Beatitudes. I mean, and that is a beautiful piece. But I don't see, especially in politicized right-wing Christianity, I don't see the compassion of Christ. I don't see loving thy neighbor. I don't see people living the example of Christ. I don't see them with the love in their heart. I see hate. It's everywhere. And so if I seem like I'm bashing, I'm really returning fire. It's like those days of hopefully burning people at the stake are over. The days of the Spanish Inquisition are hopefully over. Still fucking around with the indigenous and in the poorer countries of this world. And I love Stephen Fry, and I definitely recommend people listen to that speech, that he did. As a matter of fact, I may repost it. It's beautiful. Where he talks about, really the crimes of Christianity. You can't sidestep it. And it's like you can't turn around and, say to people, well, that's not my responsibility. Oh, no. Oh, no. The history you come from, in part, is your responsibility, and it's your responsibility to change things. I mean, it's like, well, first of all, if Jesus were alive today, he'd be hung like meat all over again by the people that claim his name. It's very simple. If you look at where he was at spiritually and philosophically, they would have been attacking him, especially if he had a large congregation, or if Jesus were a televangelist of a sort, preaching what he preached in the Bible. Oh my God, I can just hear it now. Swaggart and all these other fools would be screaming that he was of the devil. I heard, actually, I think it was Swaggart's wife when I was in Florida, and saying that the King James Bible is the only one that you should read, and because Rick Warren doesn't do that, he's misled, misguided, and there were some other things said which basically said that Rick Warren is not one of us. So, Christians do eat their own from time to time when they want a little something different on the menu. With the Catholic Church in more recent history, the crimes that were done were bad enough, but as far as I'm concerned, the cover-up was worse. And for good Catholics, you have my sympathy. You really do. This is about faith that most of you have lived with all of your lives. Yet it's been so hardwired into you that if you rebel against the church, you're going to hell. Who the fuck is a human being to excommunicate you from the energy of the divine? No. God is not sitting on their shoulders, as history has proven. Okay? These cardinals, popes, all have an agenda. They all live real fat, dumb, and happy. They're content. Occasionally, as in El Salvador, a good one gets assassinated. Good popes kind of die a little soon too. And so, I mean, and to take it further, certainly in the Islamic countries, some of the laws that they claim come out of the Quran are barbaric. They really are. The overall treatment of women I find to be offensive. I really do. But that is not my life to live. Um, and some of these evangelicals, quite frankly, have got a stick up their butt with the American flag attached to it, talking about the founding fathers and how they were this and this. You better go back and read. That's the problem. The problem with Sarah Palin and Michelle Bachmann is they speak their mind. Ted Cruz speaks his hatred. George Bush spoke his simplicity. The problem was that simplicity was connected to Dick Cheney. In retrospect, with that administration, I can't be too hard on George. I really can't. Dick, on the other hand, it's like people know. He's the one human being. I'm allowed to hate one person, okay? It like keeps the energy up. And I hate Dick Cheney. I hate everything he stands for. Everything. But, I didn't vote for him. And he was there. And he was pulling the strings. It was only at the end of that administration, W. Grew a set and started to say no more of this. He was a very cocky president. And the problem is with cocky people, you can't always get through to them because the testosterone overdoses in their brain and they are the kitten looking in the mirror seeing a lion. I do that sometimes, by the way. But, frankly speaking about it all, I mean, I've been to 44 countries, and I spent a lot of time in Vatican City when I was a kid, when I was 18, 19 years old. And, I mean, the opulence, the beauty. But I've also been in Catholic churches in Mexico and Haiti. Yeah. Talk about a prosperity gap. When I was in Mexico, they were preaching from the pulpit of the Catholic churches that AIDS was a judgment from God, and parents thought that their children were cursed and were leaving them abandoned on doorsteps, not bothering to consider that their husband or husband's considering wife to be indulging in risky behavior of some sort or the other. I really, with the exception of Dick Cheney, I don't have a lot of hate in me. I get anger. Sometimes it's a little misguided. And honestly, I do have what people would consider some conservative values about different things, but I don't want to be associated with a party with these wackos, as Barney Frank would say. And I'm very reluctant. There have been a few times in my life where I voted for a Republican. Usually they're progressive Republicans, which are pretty much like the dinosaurs. It's extinct. Some of the moderates, if they weren't so afraid of being beaten with the Jesus fish, would speak out. But it's a horrible thing that's going on in this country alone in the name of God. Not to mention that we're going into a war all over the place. We can remote control, take out people, assassinate them. And, I'm kind of old school about, fights and battles. Sometimes war is necessary. I'm sorry to say, I'm not Gandhi. But the thing is, it's no longer about fighting for freedom. It's protecting American interests, which are business interests. And I think they should tax the shit out of corporations that benefit from our military, period. I think that education should be based on merit and that children should not be saddled with $180,000 in debt or even $20,000 or $30,000 in debt for getting a degree which will help better society. Now, of course, the marriage, Frank Herbert said, when politics and religion travel in the same cart, the whirlwind will follow. Look around you. It's what's happening now. And the thing is, I fact check when people tell me things. There's no question about it. All right, I have problems with Barack Obama. He's way too much of a centrist for me. You know, he's not a socialist. You know, okay, I did when I was in Kenya visit his birthplace. Idiots. It's really disrespectful to the Secret Service, who's supposed to check out everyone that holds that office and some others to, perpetuate this outright lie. I read somewhere that Madison Avenue puts out 50 lies a day that people hear. And there are a lot of preachers and priests out there that are suborning the deceit in their sermons, in what they're saying. And I'm sorry, but it's like there are a few people out there that consider me an elitist. I'm definitely a dissenter. I'm a nonconformist. It's my nature. It's who I am, and I'm being true to that. And I'm sorry, but I'm also indifferent if people don't like it. Go hang out somewhere else. But when policies and laws affect me that are unfair, that's another matter. My father was a 30-year man, and we were going into the gates of the War College, and there were hippies protesting, and one of them spit on him. My dad was in his dress white uniform. My father was a big man. He picked up this little scrawny hippie, turned him over his knee, and spanked him in front of his friends. And he got spanked himself by his commanding officer after doing that. But as I was walking away, I said something I was a little kid too. I'm like, those fuckers. And my father kind of kneeled down and looked me in the eye, and he said, in some respects, they're the most patriotic Americans of all, because they stand up for their conscience and what they believe in the face of such adversity and such a tidal wave of disapproval. My father understood the language of metaphor too. He also understood profanese, which I'm fluent in. I'm a sailor too. I'm not going to apologize for that. Language is language. But these religious freaks talk about the founding fathers. They talk about right and wrong. It's their perception of what is right and wrong, and they try in the process to impose their views and will on everyone else. What about free will? No, we just talk about it, but you really aren't allowed to have that, and we're going to make you miserable as fuck if you don't conform to it. The lack of will. Our will. When they say thy will be done, they're not talking about God's will be done. They're talking about the will of their agenda being done. It's that simple. I have people, when I say something spouting about religious freedom, it may not be you that's pushing your stuff on other people, but you're surrounded by people of your faith who are. The indignation I have, particularly on the subject of gay marriage, gays serving in the military, it's their choice. It's a matter of conscience. And as a veteran, I try to talk young people out of going in. And if I'm satisfied that it's a matter of conscience, then I will pull them aside and say, okay, you keep my phone number in case you have any trouble that is unfair or unjust. And, this is the path that you have to follow. But, as we see in Colorado Springs in the Air Force Academy, a Jewish officer was basically run out of there because he wouldn't convert to Christianity. Ted Haggard's church, we don't hear from him anymore, is right there next to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. Military is inundated now by a lot of evangelicals. And I don't know whether or not I like Jesus people having guns and justifying it. I really don't. Now, I am somebody that absolutely holds to the Bill of Rights. And I believe in the right to bear arms. It's not something that I'm ever going to change on, because I've seen what happens in other countries when the population is disarmed. It's bad enough what we've got now. If the collective they, the system, were not afraid of defensive fighting against them, this society would be completely tyrannical. It would. If the evangelicals were to take over this country, we would have a theocracy. Democracy would be gone. Don't let anyone bullshit you to the contrary on that. It's like, again, it's not a matter of hatred. It really is. It's worse than that. It's right and wrong. And in my understanding of things, I'm not always right. But when it comes to the destruction of freedom that these organized religions have to do, have the potential to do if they gain power, I'm an American. I am very proud of being a part of this country. Where else could I get away with being me? But at the same time, I see on the horizon the potential dangers that are out there. And to my conservative friends that are not Christian, if you're going to get in bed with them, at least make it a violent night. Fucking tell people what's on your mind. Don't just go along with it to get your agenda through. Political parties within themselves are supposed to be a diverse collection. And people just sitting around doing nothing and being silent against policies that they really disagree with? Come on, you know what's right. So anyway, that's enough for now. This is Hugh Slunberg, and as I say at the end of all my videos, have a wonderful life.